Well, good day everybody. I'm Group Captain Ewan Black, the Station Commander at RAF Leeming, and I should like to welcome you very much to the Air Fair 95, which is taking place on the 10th of June. The reason for the Air Fair is really threefold. First of all, and mainly to provide money for charity, and we hope to raise somewhere in the region of about £100,000 during our display. The second reason is to welcome our local community onto the station so that they can see what the Royal Air Force does these days. They look after us in the local region. We appreciate that we make a lot of noise and disturbance to them, and this is one way we can thank them in a small way for having us in their midst. And the third reason, of course, is for the team here at Leeming under my command to form exactly that, a team, and to run an organisation and show of this magnitude. Now, we really split the show into three parts. We concentrate mainly on the flying display, and this year we have some very interesting aircraft, not least Sukhoi 27, flown by the Russians, who are coming over specially prior to going to Paris next week. And many other interesting aircraft. The show will in fact be opened by the Red Arrows, and then most of the Royal Air Force and other air forces participating as well. Secondly, there will be an arena show of various displays ongoing prior to the flying. And thirdly, there is a fashion show for the ladies. If they get somewhat bored with the flying, they can go into two-hanger, and there's a professional fashion show being laid on for them. In addition to that, of course, there is a fun fair and all the side shows that go with normal air displays. So we hope that you enjoy and have a wonderful time. We've laid on as good a show as we can, so sit back and enjoy it.
While the fast jets fly overhead, the closest today's visitors will get to that experience is a ride in a flight simulator. Although this young man can sit and dream. It's Saturday the 10th of June as the 1995 Leeming Air Fair gets underway. RAF Leeming is a major component of UK air defence, very much at the sharp end. With 2 squadrons of Tornado F-3s, it's one of the busiest stations in the RAF. Being a pilot in the RAF flying fast jets requires certain special skills and aptitudes, and sometimes a little diversification creeps in. Not satisfied with breaking the sound barrier every time he flies, Flight Lieutenant Andy Dead Dog Green from number 11 Fighter Squadron is hoping to break the sound barrier on land in the unique Thrust II supersonic car. We caught up with Andy shortly after he flew in with the BBC Blue Peter team filming him for the programme.
That's right. Richard Noble's team has put together a new land speed record attempt. Richard Noble currently holds the world land speed record at 633 miles an hour. And that may not be for much longer because there's competition. So our team is going out to set a new world land speed record and achieve the ultimate land speed record. We're going to go supersonic on ground.
Whereabouts are you going to is this going to take place?
The same desert where Richard set the current world land speed record, and that's the Black Rock Desert out in Nevada.
And how fast do you expect to go?
Well, our car, as I said, will go supersonic. We're quite confident of that. The minimum speed we're going to get it up to is 850 miles an hour. That's the speed of sound being 750. That gives us a good 100 mile an hour over the speed of sound. We're hoping in a couple of years' time, once it's safely up to that speed, we may even get it faster than that.
How do you keep something on the ground when you're going at that speed?
Well, we've got a tremendous designer in a gentleman called Ron Ayres, who has been designing supersonic missiles for a very long time. And he's designed what technically is called a ground-hugging servo mechanism. It basically means it's an upside-down wing and it sticks to the ground the faster it goes.
Is that going to create any dangers of it? I mean, how soft is the surface of the desert? Is it
well, the key, of course, is to control how much it forces itself down on the ground, and that's where the cunning part of the design is. The desert is actually, although it's a very hard mud desert, it's soft enough that we can't have too much downforce. So we have very accurate computer-controlled suspension to control the downforce very accurately.
And when is this going to take place?
Well, we're hoping to get the car ready for our first attempt at the land speed record this autumn, October in the Black Rock Desert. Nonetheless, whether or not we achieve that, and that's we fully intend to, if we have any problems, we'll most certainly be running the car next year.
And how many practice runs do you get?
Never enough is obviously the answer. We'll be taking a very incremental approach. We'll be building up the speed a little bit every day. So 10, 20, 30 runs, however long it takes safely to get up towards that sort of speed.
So in the meantime, you're going to do very mundane things like fly tornadoes around.
I would never describe flying a tornado as mundane. It's a tremendously exciting job, and the one I enjoy most. Being a fighter pilot is where my heart is at.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Flying Harrier jets in daylight can be exciting stuff in itself, but flying one at night in darkness is another. The Harrier GR7, which will be giving its unique display later, is equipped with a forward-looking infrared camera mounted on the nose. Earlier this year, 3 Squadron visited Leeming for a few weeks to do some nighttime low-altitude exercises using infrared goggles. Wing Commander Clive Loader takes up the story.
Hello, I'm Wing Commander Clive Loader. I command 3 Fighter Squadron, normally based at RAF Leeming in Germany. The reason why we're here is because we are continuing the squadron's work up to night combat ready status, and the sorties which have to be undertaken at low level in the syllabus can't be done where we're based in Germany, so we need to deploy back to UK to the night low flying system here to do that training. There are 2 systems on the Harrier GR7 which are specifically designed to enable the aircraft to fly low level at night. The first one is the forward-looking infrared, a system which is bolted to the aircraft, looks out the front and creates albeit a green and black, but nonetheless an image, and a very good image, of the outside world by temperature differential.
What advantage does this give the Harrier pilots, having these goggles and the forward-looking infrared?
Well, quite simply, if we didn't have them, we would not be able to fly at night in a tactical way. It was putting those systems into the Harrier GR7 which made it a night attack-capable machine. And once we've got the Harrier force in toto worked up to night combat-ready status, it gives to the military commander, and indeed to the politician, the capability of carrying battle to the enemy throughout the hours of darkness and denying him the respite which otherwise he would have.
Does it actually impose any limitations onto the flying ability of the pilot?
It doesn't, provided you have the safety equipment appropriately adjusted such that you can, when you go into turns and using high G, you have to have your helmet fastened quite tightly so that it doesn't rotate down. But no, you become used to it, and the onset of G is also a factor. Provided you fly the aircraft in an appropriate way, it isn't a problem.
After flying their last sortie before returning to Germany, No. 3 Squadron spotted our camera at the end of the runway and couldn't resist the chance to show off their skills, as only Harrier pilots can. From time to time, unfortunate accidents can happen to aircraft. As most low flying is done over remote countryside, recovery of aircraft and crew can become very hazardous, which is why the RAF Mountain Rescue Team was formed. But it's not only the RAF and Allied forces which benefit from their efforts. Many of their call-outs can be to assist and rescue injured or missing climbers and fell walkers. Combining their efforts with air-sea rescue helicopters from RAF Bullman and Leconfield requires some very precise training, carried out at the weekends. Corporal Linnett takes up the story.
On the Leeming team, there's 5 full-time members consisting of a team leader, the deputy team leader, a storeman, a wireless operator and an MT manager. The other 20 members of the team are made up of volunteers, part-timers from various trades throughout the camp.
Why did it end up at Leeming of all places?
I think because of its central position. It's very central for access to the North York Moors, the Lake District and the Dales. And also because it's one of the major units, and we can therefore get a lot of people, volunteers from the station. They all volunteer to give out a certain amount of their time, a minimum of 3 weekends a month for the part-time members, to train in the various areas.
So what's a typical mountain rescue that you would be called out to do?
There isn't really a typical mountain rescue as such. They vary a great deal. The type of incidents we are called to is missing walkers, occasionally missing aircraft, and rescue of survivors and aircrew from crashed aircraft. The odd fallen climber or two, and some more bizarre jobs underground as well occasionally. The training we do at weekends is all mountaineering and hillcraft training. We have stretcher exercises every now and again, once every couple of months, just to make sure everyone's competent at the use of the stretcher. We have an annual first aid course to ensure that all the guys on the team are fully up to speed with treating casualties, and occasionally helicopter exercises. The Leeming team covers an area that comes down from the borders of Scotland right the way down through the Lake District to the Northern Peak District. It's a very large area to cover, and we occasionally have to employ helicopters to dispatch us to our various call-outs.
At most mountain rescues where a helicopter is required, chances are that the terrain's very isolated and will almost certainly mean that the helicopter can't land. So it's vital that all the team are well practiced in being winched up and down from the helicopter. Here, a weekend training session takes place next to the HQ at Leeming, when new recruits are put through their paces. But it'll be no rehearsal for the reality of harsh winter conditions out on the fells, probably in total darkness. For that, there's no substitute for experience. Mountains of England to the mountains of Bosnia. 25 Squadron have just completed a tour of duty enforcing the no-fly zone over Bosnia on Operation Deny Flight. This was the scene at Leeming when the RAF VC-10 flew in with the first party of 25 Squadron personnel, greeted by Group Captain Ewan Black. Wing Commander John Middleton and his crew are given a VIP welcome. Naturally, the wives and families were relieved to see their loved ones return safe and sound. So what's life really like behind the scenes of a crack fighting squadron in the modern Air Force? Wing Commander John Middleton gives us an insight into life in the squadron.
25 Squadron has just come back, quite rightly as you say, from a second tour in Bosnia. We did a 3-month detachment based at Joya del Col. I took approximately 125 ground crew and 10 crews, 20 flying officers. And based at Joya del Col, we flew the Tornado in support of the United Nations policing the no-fly zone. A sort of a typical sort of day would be, we did 24-hour operations, I might add, so although the tasking for when we flew was from a higher authority, we could fly by day or by night. But a typical sort of day would be into the squadron 2 to 3 hours before takeoff time. We'd have an intelligence brief. We would have a local area brief. We would change into specific to type flying clothing for flying over Bosnia. We would then go out, prepare the aeroplanes, get airborne, RV with a tanker aircraft, normally a TriStar, take on fuel, and then enter into the area of operation, the AOR, and then patrol the area itself under the control of AWACS, looking for aircraft and helicopters. We would normally do about a 4-hour sortie, recovering back to tanking again, most probably, perhaps even twice during the sortie, and then recovering back to Joya del Col to debrief, and then pack up. Normally about a 6 to 8 hour working cycle.
How does that sort of lifestyle compare with the normal station lifestyle?
The flying is very similar, but Joya del Col and Bosnia itself is an operation, so it's allied more to the lifestyle is allied more to being conscious of the fact that we're flying over what would be deemed to be a low to medium risk area when we were certainly out there. So the training and the flying and the modus operandi is all geared to having the aircraft in absolutely top operational condition to fly over the area of operation in an operational scenario. In the United Kingdom, we still maintain the highest standards with our aircraft, but obviously we're training. And back in the United Kingdom, there are other pressures on our time. The focus out in Bosnia was totally doing the operation in support of the UN.
Flying a £25 million aircraft in today's modern Air Force can be a risky business. The aircraft and the men that fly them are at their peak performance, but things can go wrong. Only a few minutes ago, this Tornado F3 suffered an engine failure, only seconds before blasting down the runway. You can imagine the consequences if that engine had failed a few minutes later. A risk which is part of the daily life of a crack fighter squadron in the RAF. With the outbriefing completed, the crews are ready to walk out. Although actually they drive out to the aircraft in their hardened aircraft shelters. G-pants and an exposure suit weren't designed for walking any distance in. Even when the aircraft is fully prepared, the crew must make a visual and manual check of the aircraft and its functional flying surfaces. Once the checklist is completed, it's chocks away. The flight plan and combat tactics are a close-guarded secret between the pilots and navigators before the afternoon brush with the French Mirages. When the chance comes to take a breather between duties with a well-earned cup of tea in the offing, the crew room is the place to unwind. We caught up with a typical Tornado crew who were chatting with a visiting crew from the French Air Force before locking horns in battle in the skies later that day.
Well, we'll see whether we get GC.
The question on everyone's lips, what's it really like flying a Tornado F3?
It depends on the mission that you're actually flying. Some of the flying we do is particularly tedious, like the Bosnia flying, just flying round and round, combat air patrol, waiting for something to happen that hopefully won't happen. But during peacetime training, for example this afternoon we're doing some training with some French Mirages, and obviously we'll pretend we're at war right from the beginning, and it will be straight into a turning, burning, and quite an aggressive fight, which yes, is good fun. It gets the blood flowing, the heart beating, the adrenaline up.
Do you ever get airsick?
Not in the Tornado. The Tornado is a very, very smooth airplane, but in a previous life I was flying the Phantom, and I was sick virtually every trip. But it's something you get used to. You know, you can be sick with one hand and work the radar with the other as a navigator. As a pilot, obviously it would cause more problems. But the Tornado is very, very smooth.
But the pilots tend not to be sick, well, because they wouldn't be able to fly if they were sick. So it's that's a bit of a no-no. But you tend to find that if you're flying it, it's like driving your car. You're never car sick if you're driving it yourself. And even no matter how you throw it around as a pilot, you tend not to feel sick.
Because you know what's coming next.
Well, you know what's happening, yeah. You're controlling it. The one sortie will probably take up 3 to 4 hours of your day. Although you may be only airborne for an hour and a half. There's the briefings, there's the preparation prior to the briefing itself, the sortie. It takes probably half an hour to get out to the aircraft to start prior to takeoff, and probably 20 minutes from landing to actually walking back into the squadron. Then there's a debrief, the checking of the films and the engineering debrief as well. So although you may go home and say to your wife, I just flew once today, you've probably spent 4 or 5 hours dedicated to that one sortie, and then in between that you've got your other secondary duties to deal with as well.
Is flying fast jets in the RAF anything like the film Top Gun?
Thankfully not.
No, it's just it's a normal job which is exciting, and I wouldn't ever choose anything different. It is different every day. You don't work at a standard 8 till 5, there's no clocking on. If you've got to work a long day, you work 13 hours, you have to do your paperwork as you're going through doing training sorties. You have to write each one up, so you do the sortie, you have to debrief, you have to get into the admin side of it. We don't just throw our kit off and go down to the bar with our shades on and our white uniforms on.
There's a very, very small glamorous side to it, but Top Gun took that one small part of the job and made a movie out of it. The glamorous side of it is air shows and things. I mean, the actual job itself, it's hard work. It's physically hard, it's mentally hard. It's hard on the families because you're away from home a lot. I hate wearing gas masks and things. We do a fair bit of that on exercises, workups. So the glamorous side is there, but only in a very, very small percentage.
It's exciting, but it's not a movie's, not the level of the movies.
Sadly, after 2.5 years, Wing Commander John Middleton has come to the end of his role as CO of 25 Squadron. John reflects on his years at the helm.
Yes, I come to the end of 2.5 interesting years at a time when, as I've been alluding to during the conversation, the Air Force has had some interesting challenges. It would be fair of me to say that as a fast jet aviator, the accolade that everybody strives for is to command their own squadron. I've been very pleased and to have been given the opportunity to command a squadron. As I come to the end, it's going to be very sad. I think I'm going to be, I don't know what's going to happen. For the last 2.5 years, I've been the boss, as I'm known as, and I've had up to 140 ground crew, 40 officers, and I've been responsible. It's a family. You get to know everybody. You not only get to know the individuals, you get to know their wives, their children. The Air Force tries to foster a family atmosphere, so I am losing my family. But we have to move on. We have to. One can get stale in an appointment, and a new commanding officer will bring new ideas and new innovations, which is one of the successes of the Air Force. Sadly, I have finished my flying now. I may fly again, I don't know, but in my time in the Air Force, I've flown over 4,000 hours on fast jet aeroplanes. I may get the opportunity to fly again, but we have to wait and see. I hope I do.
With much speculation about the weather, the airfare preview and arrival of the visiting aircraft turned out to be a perfect flying day, with clear air, low wind and high broken cloud. As the AWACS E3 Sentry from Waddington arrived to give a short display, coincidentally the Nimrod joined in the circuit after letting a visiting Tornado GR1 into land, and then following a short time later. As the Sentry made its final approach, the cameraman's dilemma, as two F-15s from the US Air Force made a spectacular break over the AWAC as she touched down. Two F-15s then gave the crowds a nice little cameo, came into land and joined the other static exhibits. But how do you go about acquiring such aircraft? Wing Commander Dave Hurley sheds a little light on the subject.
The flying display starts very early. We actually start requesting participants as soon as one airfare has finished. We do it in two ways. We first go off through the Participation Committee, which is a Ministry of Defence committee, and by asking them, we're asking for military involvement in the air display. Our own Tornadoes, Harriers, other RAF aircraft, and also asking for their support to go out and book other military aircraft from NATO nations. So that's the one way we do it. We're also aware of a significant number of civilian display teams. These people are well advertised and they're well known throughout the display season. And so we're aware of them, and again we would go out, look at their advertising and see whether it would complement the sort of display that we're putting together. And if it does, then we would actually physically hire them in, same as you would do a car, hire them in as an attraction for the day.
Great. And how about foreign non-NATO participants? How's an initial contact made to the Russians, for example, without going into what we were talking about?
Okay, I mean, it's the same sort of procedure. We know very well who are on the display circuit. There are only so many aircraft or aircraft types on the display circuit, and of course they get known. So again, through the display circuit, we find out their contacts, who's representing them either in this country or within NATO, and then we would go through those again, and we would hire them in almost as civilians. We wouldn't look to hire them in as military aircraft, but we would hire them in as civilian. The Russians were hired, are represented in this country by 2 agencies, one of which is at BAE at Woodford, and there's another agency down in London. We were aware of those agencies, and we went direct to those agencies and asked for the Su-27s to come in this year. And it's a question then of a straightforward contract being drawn up, as we do with all the civilian teams who are participating this year.
As more and more visitors arrived, the weather showed little signs of improving. An early arrival by the B-17, with the name Sally B on its port side and Memphis Belle on the starboard, came into land in good time, as her display wasn't until much later on in the afternoon. As they always do, the Red Arrows gave an explosive start to the 1995 flying display. Unfortunately, the cloud base was only about 2,000 feet, but under the grey skies they gave the assembled crowds a stunning performance of precision flying, as only the Red Arrows know how to. Over to you, chaps. But even after such a display as that, the Reds don't just land. Showman to the end, a spectacular peel away is captured by our man on the tower. As latecomers drift away from the crowd line to view the rest of the show, the graceful Lancaster bomber from the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight comes into land ready for her display later. The veteran Lancaster takes up a position in the flying static display area as two F-3s, the current RAF hardware, make their way to the end of the runway, ready to fly down to Biggin Hill Air Display. Overhead, the Falcon's parachute team's Hercules tests the cloud-based level. It's getting too low for a jump now. Perhaps it might lift? First of the old flying machine companies to display is a MiG-15, flown by Ray Hanna, which should have had with it the F-86 Super Sabre, but unfortunately, due to some last-minute technical problems, the MiG-15 had the crowd to itself. What more can be said of the Westland Sea King in its traditional role of air-sea rescue, flown today by Ed Straw of 202 Squadron Bulmer. The helicopter's seen many years in service with the RAF. The big yellow budgies from Bulmer and Leconfield are a familiar sight down the east coast of England, perfectly suited for the task in hand. Here's a genuine search and rescue off Sandsend in August 1994 for a cabin cruiser reported in difficulties. The helicopter pinpointed an oil slick and floating debris, but from what remains a mystery. However, the Sea King takes on many guises with both the Army and the Navy, and it's proved its worth time and time again. But the Reds always seem to distract the most dedicated of cameramen. The blue liveried Tucano, the Brazilian-designed RAF trainer, whilst not as dramatic as its jet predecessor, is infinitely more manoeuvrable, versatile, and difficult to follow with a big camera. Perhaps this one's easier. Versatile jet pilot trainer to the world's most versatile jet, and definitely not a trainer. Unique, unbelievable, and British. The Harrier GR7 is the latest variant in this thoroughbred of fast jets, flown today by Richard McIntosh from 20R Squadron. The Harrier V-Star has come a long way since the Flying Bedstead and the short SC-1. Will we see a supersonic Harrier? I wonder what the next generation will bring. This Fairy Firefly AS5 from the Fleet Air Arm Museum in Yeovilton has a very interesting and well-travelled history. It appears in the markings of the Korean War theatre, although it in fact didn't see any action there. It was built in Hayes in Middlesex in 1949. First went into service with 814 Squadron at Culdrose. In 1951, it was transported to Anthorn in Cumbria and shipped as deck cargo on HMS Warrior to Singapore, where it was put into storage until 1953 before going into service with the Royal Australian Navy with 816-817 Squadron. Then, in 1962, it was back into storage at Nowra in New South Wales. In 1966, a visiting Fleet Air Arm representative saw the plane and realised its possibilities for the museum at Yeovilton. It was sold for £160 to Lieutenant Commander Apps and brought back to the UK on HMS Victorious. In 1972 it was made airworthy again, but with a different engine. It was felt that the original Rolls-Royce Griffon engine was underpowered at 2,245 horsepower, so a 2,450 horsepower Griffon from a Shackleton was put in instead. Right, now it's time to put in the earplugs. Number 11 Fighter Squadron formation display. Take up position for a tornado display with a difference. The humble jet provosts have a difficult task following such an ear-shattering spectacle, but the veteran duo acquit themselves to a very tidy display in spite of advancing years. The jet provost remains a robust jet aircraft, still in service as a jet trainer in various parts of the world. Many of them are ex-RAF aircraft, and they're eagerly sought after by enthusiasts and museums in the UK and Europe. Here's one that thankfully did get away. As to many people, the main component of the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, the BBMF, is the lovingly cared for City of Lincoln, the only flying example of the Lancaster bomber. It's a tribute to those that didn't return during the dark days of the early 1940s. The low cloud base certainly didn't restrict Peter Clark and his Slingsby Firefly. The aircraft is manufactured in Kirby Moorside, only a few miles away from Leeming. But it's time for the earplugs again, as Leeming's answer to the Red Arrow's formation display team takes to the skies. Sounds a bit like Come Dancing, doesn't it? That's where the similarity definitely stops, though. It's not often you see a Tornado F3 formation display, and this aptly demonstrates the stability of this aircraft, as the formation remains rock steady. Also says a lot about the skills of No. 11 Fighter Squadron's pilots, demonstrating the competence of the flyers in today's RAF, many of whom have already served or probably will serve a posting with the Red Arrows. As they line up with a final beat to go down the runway, notice how the last aircraft in the line encounters the turbulence of the preceding aircraft. And just when you thought it was safe to take out the earplugs, in comes the GR1 from the tripartite training section at RAF Cottesmore. As the two other components of the BBMF take up their positions, yet another Tornado F3 appears out of nowhere as it punches out of the low cloud to thoroughly confuse the assembled crowd with mutterings of, "Where the hell did he come from?" So, with minor distractions out of the way, the stage is set for the BBMF to give their classic display to the crowds, as Squadron Leader Chris Stevens in his Spitfire and Flight Lieutenant Paul Shenton in the Hurricane demonstrate how the RAF gained supremacy in the skies in the dark days of World War II. Soak up the sound of those Merlin engines. And to complete the picture, the Lancaster bomber, flown by Richard Broombridge, makes a low flypast over the runway. Meanwhile, Sally B, her American counterpart, completes the scene as the city of Lincoln sweeps across in the background. So the classic threesome take their final bow as they head back home to Lincolnshire, shortly followed by 3 Tornadoes arriving home here at Leeming. By the time Sally B came back into the circuit to display, the weather had taken a dramatic turn for the worse. As the B-17, the star of the film Memphis Belle, gave an extremely low display, her crew of Captain Mac McKinney, with Jim Jewell and Chief Engineer Peter Brown, deserved a big round of applause for performing in such conditions. But shortly before the conditions deteriorated as they did, Jeff Day in his Bell Jet Ranger swooped in to give a lively display, but he found himself slightly upstaged as the stars of the show were beginning to warm up and to perform their set pieces under the skies of Leeming. But their appearance wasn't all plain sailing. Group Captain Ewan Black takes up the story.
Well, the Russian pilot flying the Su-27 tomorrow is one Anatoly Kvotcha. And back in 1988, he in fact brought a MiG-29 to Farnborough. And I went up in the Tornado F-3 from my squadron then and intercepted him over the North Sea. I escorted him into Farnborough, and there's a picture here of me shaking hands with him. And that's the last I saw of him then. The next year he went to Paris, and you may remember that the MiG-29 he was displaying there actually crashed. He was doing a high angle of attack manoeuvre, one of the engines quit, and he ejected, and you can see the picture here of the seat, and he's separated. This is rather a spectacular one where the nose of the aircraft is actually in the ground, but it hasn't gone into a fireball yet, and you can see his chute's not yet opened. And then, fractions of a second later there, he's just touching the ground with his chute barely open, the seat landing next door and the fireball. So we'd arranged that he would come some months ago. We heard earlier this week that he planned not to now come here. He was only going to go to Paris. But because I knew him, I sent him a letter saying, could you change your mind, please, and come on over. And we heard this morning that he's changed his mind, he's going to come here. So he will be arriving today, this evening, and I'll meet him, and then he's going to display tomorrow before he goes back to Paris.
So this
What was almost as impressive as the flying was the precision of the taxiing out to the runway. The Russian Sukhoi Su-27 flanker is normally used as a strike interceptor fighter and was introduced back in 1986, armed with a bewildering amount of radar and anti-jamming technology. The Su-27 is capable of Mach 2.35, can pull 9G, and has a range of nearly 4,000 kilometers without refueling, making this a very potent aircraft indeed. Add to that its incredible maneuverability, and you can see the amazing advances made in current fighter technology. Incidentally, the Su-27 was the aircraft used by the Russian Knights who appeared at the RAF Finningley display back in 1991. The display starts with several close formation circuits and develops into some very spectacular imposing manoeuvres which confused our cameramen no end, not knowing which aircraft was doing what. Display coordinator, squadron leader Phil Luxton looks on in disbelief at the precision of Anatolia Korochna and Vladimir Loganovsky as they perform a well-rehearsed display. One can only wonder what they could have done had the weather been more favourable. Duck! Anatolia peels off to give his fantastic solo performance. Party piece is the extremely skillful slow pass at the very brink of stalling his aircraft at a speed of double figures. The power's eased on as the engines roar right above our cameraman, who swears he felt the heat from the afterburn. As the display draws to an unfortunately premature close, the public were making for the exits. This couple were doing it in style. Barely visible in the fine drizzle, the three-ship Spitfire team, flown by Ray Hanna, Nigel Lamb and Cliff Spink, makes a valiant effort to see where they're going. As you can see, our camera lenses were very quickly suffering against the elements, preventing any further filming of this display. As the very damp public made their way home, so did many of the aircraft. As the GR1 taxis to head back to RAF Cottesmore, much to the relief of our cameraman, the display was well and truly over. If you've enjoyed watching this video, then the 1993 and 94 Leeming Air Fair videos are still available from this address. They're £12 each, plus postage and packing of £1.50.